So then, when I graduated,
You were the fifth.
I was the fifth.
Uh-huh.
Then the day after graduation, out, and I went to Des Moines.
To the
where
aunt.
My elder sister,
And your sister.
was already married.
Who was the
Her name was Rose.
Rose, yeah. Yeah. It was already married.
She was married. She married Gottstein.
Gottstein.
And there are many Gottstein children in part of that family. And so I lived with them while I went to Drake University. And
How old were you when you went to Drake University?
I was 15.
15.
I was 15, and I remember I had my first real boyfriend that I could have a date with, and he was older, like he was 19. And I never wanted him to know how young I was.
No.
Never told him, or wouldn't dare. And then, lo and behold, the campus paper
featured you as the
a picture one day as the youngest
student at Drake University. Couldn't hide it.
I thought that that was the end of the romance, but somehow it went on. And then I had to work in order to earn some money. So I
at 15.
Yeah, so I took over as secretary to a law firm that my sister had worked. I inherited her job. Okay. And I remember Mr. Bob Lappin, the boss, once told my sister that he was just fascinated with how I kept going in that job. He said, "You dictate to me." And somehow I never asked him to stop because I couldn't keep pace with it. And he said I'd go faster and faster, and she would just get nervously. She would try to do it. And she never asked me to stop. And he said, and finally I felt so sorry for her. I said to her, "Why don't you stop me when I'm going faster than you can write?" All right.
So you were at Drake,
yeah,
and you had the job.
I spent a year there.
At Drake.
And it wasn't particularly eventful, but it was a time for me to sort of see the larger Jewish community and how it operated and that kind of thing. My younger brother and sister were twins, and Riva and Lou. And by the time that they were in high school, then my parents decided this is no way, because all the children were scattered, and they said, "You just have to pull us all back together. We have to become a family again." So they decided to move to Minneapolis. And my sister, the teacher, stayed in Minnesota where she was teaching. But there was my brother Sam, my brother Joe, and me, and the two younger ones.
And Riva and Lou. Yeah.
And we were constituted a family. And then...
so you all came to Minneapolis. She called you.
At some point, my sister Ann, the teacher, found that she just couldn't go on as the lone person in Meadowlands, Minnesota, where she was. And it was decided that she should also come and join the rest of the family in Minneapolis. And I got a job, part-time, going to the University of Minnesota at night school, also with that Borshak firm. So the three of us were working there at the same time, and my sister got a job as a nursery school teacher. And Rita and Lou were in high school.
In Minneapolis. And were your parents working?
And my parents, after a while, somehow he put together a store, a little dry goods store in a Polish neighborhood. And he spoke Polish, so
so there you are.
So I think he just about made his rent. There was no profit there, but he kept busy. And at first, in Minneapolis, I wanted to be free. I to be free so I could have a big social life.
It's that time of life now,
And
the late 20s.
Didn't want to join anything. I didn't want to do anything that would take away
Tie you down.
my freedom, freedom, freedom. And people used to say to me that I should join Junior Hadassah, and I said, no, I want to be free. That's
Nothing changes from generation to generation.
And then one day, one of the senior Hadassah lady got hold of me, and she said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. That you should stay on the outside and not come in and help this Zionist group of young people. And she gave me a big lecture. And I guess at that point I joined. And that was
Junior Hadassah.
That was the beginning of my
Involvement.
life with Hadassah.
Hmm.
That's right.
It was in the 20s. Yeah? Or
That was in the mid-20s.
mid-20s.
And then I moved into president of the group, and then I was the regional president, and then we did such a good job that the national put me on the national board, and then the next thing I know is that I became the national vice president, and that was my Hadassah world.
All from Minneapolis. You were
Started
in
in
Minneapolis, but you were still in Minneapolis and going to in the national circles.
That's right. And Minneapolis is a very rich Jewish community.
And you located in the Jewish
My family moved right into the Jewish neighborhood.
Jewish neighborhood.
And they went to
Participate.
any Jewish meetings anywhere.
There they were. There were the zips.
There
In
were the
force.
zips. There were the zips.
And were you going to the university this whole time?
At night school.
Mm-hmm.
Good. And then, but also all the while, it was, as far as my parents were concerned, Yiddishkeit is the most important thing. Yiddishkeit.
Mm.
Fortunately, in Minneapolis, there was a community of people who also had the same values, and so we were never lonely in that, in that sense. And I'm going to skip now to how I landed in New York.
Can I just ask you one last question
Sure.
about Hurley before we leave that
I heard it,
section?
Jeff.
Do you have any comments from this experience of growing up really kind of isolated in a small town being Jewish that you would make a comment about what it's like, or any conclusions you would make about growing up Jewish in a small town?
Well, as I think back on it, I think it was the steadfastness of my parents. And we didn't ask questions.
Just
That
what
is
you do. It's amazing. It
This
must
is
said
just
so much
the
about
way
them.
it is.
Yeah.
You don't ask questions. That doesn't mean that we didn't feel deprived
Inside, yeah, as
Sure.
children, yeah.
Sure. When
And you didn't suffer.
When I couldn't participate in that typing contest, I hated being Jewish, but I'm sure it broke my mother's heart to see me in tears, but that was just it. That was it.
And moving on to New York, I just wanted to,
All
see
right.
how you got to New York.
I had gone to two national conventions, as the president,
Of
as
the
the regional
local,
president. So I had gone to two. So I knew the people in the national office already quite well by that time. And they were just flooding me with assignments and conventions. And I came to New York, I don't remember the exact year, but it had to be something like 1937. And I wanted the experience of living in this big New York. I don't know if I'll believe it or not. I thought it would be fascinating to get onto a subway train
We all did know.
and to be squeezed against the door and not be able to move until the train stopped And I thought, wouldn't it be exciting to do that every single morning?
And was it?
Well, my family consented. It was a good idea. For 6 months I should do it. So I had to get a job right away.
Right away.
And I don't know how I got to it, but there was the organization, it was some kind of a board of Jewish education of which Mr. Benderly was the director. And Benderly took me on as his secretary. So that was my introduction to work.
And organized Jewish life in New York.
That's right. And that's right. And then, by that time, I was being asked to become the national president.
National president.
And I kept saying, no, I was tired.
The 4th or the 5th?
Worn out. I didn't want that much responsibility. And I wouldn't give the girls a yes answer. And convention time was approaching and they had to know, and this went on. And then there was a senior Hadassah convention in Atlantic City. And I think they discussed it with senior Hadassah. And it was decided that I should be one of the junior Hadassah delegates to the senior Hadassah convention in Atlantic City. And Henrietta Zoll was at that convention. And she was asked if she would speak to our little group of juniors who were there. And she consented. And we were just in awe of this great lady. I don't know what birthday that was for her, but they were celebrating one of her big birthdays. And then one of the girls in this little group meeting said to her, we're trying to get Nell Zesmer to take on the presidency. And she said, oh, how lucky you are, Miss Zesmer.
Oh.
How lucky you are. And then she went on some more to tell me some of the things she hoped we would do in Israel.
Of course, moving right on to the big vision in the future.
And of course, that did it.
That did it. Who was that lady that did it? Your friend.
That's right. That's right, that did it. But anyhow.
Irresistible.
Yeah, and she was just a magnificent woman. And the whole Jewish world somehow rested in this person. And anyhow, came back to New York, and I was elected president. And then I got this opportunity for a second job. And there was an organization known as the, if I can remember, Shomrei Hadat.
Shomrei Hadat. Mm-hmm.
Its purpose was to help Orthodox Jewish immigrants that were coming from Israel. Mm-hmm. I mean, from Germany. To find jobs. They had special needs.
That's right, like your brothers.
I knew only a little German that I had picked up at school. And I didn't know New York. I didn't know Delancey Street from Broadway. I was a stranger in that town. And I was applying for this job. On their part, as was told to me subsequently, they thought that to be the president of Junior Hadassah, I had to be special, and that I surely would have contacts that would be important for this kind of a job. But what I think appealed to them most was I mentioned that my brothers were in the woolens and fabrics business and did business with the mills.
The mills in New York.
Now, the only kind of jobs that these immigrants, the refugees, could handle, because they didn't have language, were either busboys or stock boys with big industries.
Yeah.
So they thought, oh, this is a plus. So they gave me the job. They gave me the job. And somehow my German improved, and I used Yiddish when I didn't know German. And every day, my address was at, I think it was 120 Wall Street, down on Wall Street.
On Wall Street.
They got somebody to lend us some space, and they used to come to me in the morning and apply for the jobs, and then I would take them by hand,
right,
and I'd go with them to the different mills, and it was a very rewarding job, and
I'll bet. I bet it was fascinating to help them like that.
Really,
you were their linguist.
It was a very exciting job for me to see them placed, So, anyhow, I was at that job for I don't know, about a year.
In the 30s now, we're in the 30s.
And I think they were already beginning to see that they weren't getting the most out of me, because I was the president of Hadassah, and I was polled.
Yeah, you had
a
a
lot
lot
of
to
calls. I had a lot of calls, and it was hard for me, it was hard for them, but